Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome back to Saturday Hodgepodge. Again, I'm on a roll this week with not planning things, so this is pretty going to be pretty off the cuff, and a discussion of, as usual, books and things going on in my life and things I just want to talk about on a Saturday. So, if you follow me on Twitter, if you've been watching my videos, you know that I've been very much observing the election process here in the United States and the unraveling of whatever was left of the mind of the President of the United States, the exposure of whatever semblance of sanity that existed within the Republican Party and commitment to process and democracy, and all that's been falling apart. So now we're just waiting to see how insane things can get with the President of the United States, and hopefully we can get through the next 68 days relatively safely. But aside from that, I did want to apologize for not being as active on Booktube this week. I'll probably watch fewer Booktube videos this week than I have in any 10-day period of time, or I should say since a week, in any week since I've been on Booktube, and I apologize for that. I have been, as Jack from Ramble, Raconteur can tell you, and anyone who follows me on Twitter can tell you, I have been obsessively watching election results and things like that, and it has kept me away from reading and from Booktube. So I'd just say, thank goodness for buddy reads, because buddy reads are the things that have kept me reading. I'm engaged in two. One big buddy read with a Voxer group is of our own Hannah from Hannah's Books book, Unspeakable, the Story of Junius Wilson, which she co-authored with a woman named Susan Burch, and we are going to have our check-in for this tomorrow. Really been enjoying this. Like I said, not going to go into detail here, but our check-in with this is tomorrow, and I did finish my section of reading with that. My other buddy read is with Noelle, and her channel would show up in your comments as Book Rookie. She doesn't make videos. Maybe that'll change. And Noelle and I are reading SPQR by Mary Beard. I'm not quite read my section this time, but I should have it read tomorrow and be ready to check in. And those buddy reads have kept me reading. That kind of sense of obligation to somebody else has kept me going. That's been really helpful, and that kind of got me back to reading again this week. And I did start reading one of the books that I was going to read independently for Nonfiction November, and that's The Saddest Word, William Faulkner's The Civil War by Michael Gorra, which I still have very mixed feelings about. If you watch my brief, relatively scattered and random video about the authorial voice in historical writing that I put out on Thursday, you got a glimpse into my incomplete thoughts and what I was thinking, and a lot of that was motivated by Gorra's The Saddest Words, which is written in first person, as, by the way, is Mary Beard's SPQR, and they are providing me that contrast between first-person historical writing that I think works and first-person historical writing that I'm not all that sure works. But anyway, that's kind of where I am, and that's what I've been reading, and so that is picking back up, and my Booktube watching is picking back up. Just wanted to remind everybody how important it is to wear your mask here in the United States and other places. But the pandemic in the United States has spun out of control. I think to pretend that we have any semblance of control over what's going on now in the United States would be ridiculous. Our government has failed us, many of us at the state level, certainly at the national level. I mean, the president's not even really attempting to do anything, provide any leadership at this point other than to praise himself, which means it's just down to us as individuals. And one of the things that we can do is wear a mask, and so I want to reemphasize how important it is that you wear a mask, that you socially distance. If you do feel like you have to have and cannot avoid holiday gatherings, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure what I'm going to do about Thanksgiving and then Christmas. We don't know. I know what the right thing to do is, but I also know that it hurts my heart to think that I won't get to see my parents, my daughter for Thanksgiving, and I don't even want to think about Christmas. But wearing the mask and ventilation can mitigate some of that danger. So let me encourage you to do that, and let me use the example, which if you follow my channel, is most recent in my own memory about this, and this has to do with my wife. Without going into details, which I cut out of the last video, but without going into details, my wife, who works at a school, had an emergency at her school, and that emergency forced she and another employee to be in close proximity to one another as they were dealing with a student, and they were in proximity with one another for several hours. Now, ordinarily, she practices social distancing at work. This was occasions when she couldn't. She was wearing a mask, and the other woman was wearing a mask. Well, I think more than 10 days ago now, we found out that the other woman had been exposed to COVID. She'd gone to a small gathering where people gathered without masks, and one of the 10 or 15 people there had COVID and spread it to her, which meant that she had potentially spread COVID to my wife because they'd been in close proximity with one another. And then last week, my wife did start to feel ill, and so we were worried that she in fact had COVID. She had a test that came back negative. We were blessed in that respect. But if my wife did not get COVID, I have to say that part of the reason is because she was wearing a mask and the other woman was wearing a mask. Masks will not prevent all COVID-19 infections. They will not. The mask is most effective when it's worn by the person who is infected with COVID-19 because it blocks the droplets, and it also blocks the aerosols coming out of their mouth. But my wife was wearing hers also, and so I credit the mask wearing with preventing my wife from getting sick, because she was in a place where she would have definitely been exposed without it. So let me just encourage you to wear a mask, to shorten the length of your gathering, to limit the number of people, to gather in a place where there's a lot of ventilation. Ventilation, we are learning, matters a lot. Not being in a closed room with no circulation of air from the outside. That ventilation matters a lot. If you feel like you have to gather, then do it as safely as you possibly can, even though I accept the idea that it's safest for us not to gather. But wearing a mask, I think, is incredibly important. So I want to make that plea with you again, because I've done that several times. The third thing I wanted to do is just to make a recommendation to you about a Netflix series called Queen's Gambit. I don't know if you've seen this, but it is on Netflix, and it essentially follows the life trajectory of a young girl into young womanhood who is, in fact, a chess prodigy. It's set in the 1950s and 60s, so it's got a lot of great period costumes and ideas and music. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I think there are like eight parts to it. I really enjoyed it, and so I'd recommend it. But in watching Queen's Gambit, it occurred to me that it seemed really similar to one of my favorite movies of all time. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Hustler, starring Paul Newman. And in that movie, Paul Newman is an incredibly gifted young pool player who goes around hustling pool, and he wants to play the best, and he wants to win and be the best. He has all kinds of problems along the way. And if these two stories sound similar to you, the chess prodigy and the pool player sound similar, it's probably because the books on which both the movie and the Netflix series are based were written by the same author, and that author's name was Walter Tevis. Tevis wrote The Hustler. It was made into a movie, and that success, I think, allowed him to become an instructor of creative writing somewhere, I think in the South, like the University of Kentucky or something like that. And he continued to write, and at some point in his life he wrote the novel became the basis for Queen's Gambit. So there is a similarity between the two. But anyway, I do definitely think it's worth a watch if you are, isolating and self-quarantining as the pandemic goes on. This is not a bad way to spend, 7 or 8 hours. It may be more than that. I don't really pay attention to time, but I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty well acted, and I thought the chess was interesting. I used to think I was going to become, a serious chess player, probably because my best friend became a fairly serious chess player, and I realized right away that I didn't have the patience or the discipline for learning all the things that I needed to learn. But anyway, there's my recommendation for that, and I think that's pretty much it for this Saturday. Hope you're all staying well. Try to socially distance, ventilate, wear a mask. All those things are important, and stay safe. And if you're the praying type, pray for the peaceful transition of power. here in the United States. Anyway, there you go. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.